What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Weekly Scraps. We are here in Las Vegas. I am at the Fontainebleau Hotel. Thank you guys for the hospitality. Thanks for taking care of us on this staycation. And guys, we got to watch UFC Mexico City, and the main event was a great fight. Very tactical. I will love to say this. Congrats to Brandon Moreno, because I was a little bit concerned, thinking that he might have lost that fire that, the fighters who they go up, they get to a pinnacle, and then after a while, it seems like they might have lost the edge and lost that fire to want to compete and fight and scrap it out. And of course, a style like that, it's not like a grappler style, it's a striker style. And we're used to seeing Brandon Moreno kind of jump into the fire and get in the mix. And his last few fights, I kind of feel like it's been a little bit up and down. It was like we see shades of it, and then we see a little bit of timidity. But this time, we saw a little bit more not even a little bit, a lot more confidence from him against Erceg. And I thought it was a great performance. He kind of had like that signature boxing-esque style, very similar to Canelo. I thought it was a very well put together performance. Now, there's one thing I will have to say. He didn't have as much volume as I would have liked. The classic vintage Brandon Moreno who comes out, he's putting on a lot more volume than that. It's not like a Max Holloway type of volume, but it's a lot more than what he was doing in terms of the output. With that said, I still think he did enough to win the fight. Now, there were some close rounds. The only round that I could really say that Steve Erceg, I think his name is Steve. Let me not be butchering this man's name. Steve Erceg. Sorry. Mahalo. Erceg was taking round 2. Other than that, I felt like it was a little bit tit for tat, close rounds, but Moreno had more of the wow moments in those other rounds. Rounds 1, of course, you see where he's going with the jab to the body, jab up top, where he's almost just punching at the glove. And then as he's coming in, he's coming with a big check hook, but it's not wide. It's just changing the trajectory of his strike from going straight down the middle, and then right at the end, just throwing it into a hook and catching him, landing some body shots. I would have liked to see a little bit more body shots out of Moreno, because I do think there was some great opportunities there. But overall, we get to see Brandon Moreno get back in the win column, and on top of that, look good and almost his vintage old form. And that's very promising, because a guy like him is a very fun fighter. Oh my God. Excuse me. 31 years old. And of course, he's not super old. I'm 35. For him to be doing that at 31, you reach the pinnacle at an early age. You do wonder if guys start to plateau or reach their peak, hit their prime, hit their stride. And it's nice to see that he still has more fight left in the tank. A guy like me, I'm a big fan of Brandon Moreno. Of course, Erceg, super tough dog, comes into the UFC, bursts onto the scene hot, 3-0, gets a title shot, and then from the title shot goes 0-3. It's not like he's not trying. He's fighting the best of the best and comes up short. With that said, I would like to see what's next for him. There's a couple of fun matchups in the flyweight division for him. But right now, Brandon Moreno is back on top. I know they have the UFC Guadalajara card. I hope I said that right. So it'll be interesting to see if they match him up to be maybe the co-main event or main event. We'll see. I know they're going to do that for the Noche later this year. But either way, all in all, great performance for Brandon Moreno. I don't think it was the old school vintage Brandon Moreno, but I think it was still a good enough performance where, for me, getting the win is good. But if we had to grade the performance on the scale of Brandon Moreno, his greatest performances versus this, I'm going to say he's probably like a B+. So there's still room for him to go out there and improve and show the old shades of him. And, man, of course, we all want to see him fight for a title again, but I think he's fought Pantoja like 10 times already. But honestly, I would like to watch it for the 15th time. I really don't care. Eventually, they say, what is it? 9 out of 10 times, 5 out of 10 times. I think eventually Brandon Moreno can get that W as long as he keeps improving. But I do think that performance right there, I don't know if it would have been enough, just because it was more one-dimensional than adding in the grappling, adding in the submission attempts and things like that, and the wild, just crazy pace of Pantoja, who's just throwing bombs at you and pushing you to the brink of exhaustion. So, great matchup. If he could potentially get back to a title shot, I don't think that should be the next one. I do think it should be a title eliminator. with the state of the flyweight division because there's not enough talent. It's not the deepest pool. I do think there's a shit ton of guys out there on the regional circuit, Pumi Nakuda being one of them. I might be a little bit biased, but the guy's 9-0, and he's a really high-level talent outside of the UFC. There are really good guys. Of course, the UFC wants the exciting fighters. They want the guys who are going to be going there, standing and banging, and just throwing down in the pocket. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is, did you win? And that's what Pumi Nakuda does well. So just going back, I do think Brandon Moreno might need one or two more because, again, he did fight Pantoja about 4 or 5 times. I don't know how many times they fought, but you lose that many times to the current champ, it's going to be really, really difficult to entice the UFC to give you another crack at the title at the same guy who's holding the belt, who beat you multiple times. But you add in some of these new guys, you shake up the division a little bit. If Pantoja is to lose his belt, the door is wide open for a guy like Brandon Moreno. So all in all, great performance. I think B+, not being super critical of it. I just think there's shades of things he did well in a very one-dimensional fight, but things he could have taken from some of his previous fights, added it in, and even made it that much more of a shutout performance. I think leaving a little bit too much room for discussion where people were, I think there's some people crazy enough to say they thought Erceg won the fight. I'm just like, you're making my head hurt. Don't stress me out. Don't stress me out. It was a great fight. He fought well. He fought hard. But it wasn't enough to take the rounds. And in my opinion, the former champ did enough, more than enough, to get the job done. And again, these were close rounds. I'm not knocking Erceg whatsoever, but I'm just giving you my personal opinion. I do think Brandon Moreno was the rightful winner of that fight. You could maybe make an argument for one more round, but even that, I don't even know which round that would have been. All in all, I thought Brandon Moreno was doing a great job landing that right hand over and over again. And as he lands the right hand, he weaves out. This way, Erceg was throwing the left hook and missing him. Just coming over the top, giving him a haircut every single time. But Erceg did land some great combinations, some good stuff. It looked like he was starting to take over the pressure, but then Moreno was able to reset. Great coaching in the corner. All in all, great performance. Excited to see what's next for him. I would say Manel Kopp is a great matchup, but then I think Manel's in a different career path right now where if Manel wins his next one, I think it's hard to deny Manel Kopp an opportunity to fight for a world title. So I don't think that matchup makes a lot of sense right now, just based on where they're both at in their careers. But all in all, looking to see what's up and what is next for vintage Brandon Moreno. He was looking like baby Canelo out there. I mean, the head movement, boom, swagging side to side, pivoting, and then sitting here, boom, boom, jab, bob, body, left hook to the body. Really, really clean stuff. But again, volume will be the deciding factor, especially against a one-dimensional type of fighter in Steve Erceg. You get a guy like Pantoja, you get a guy like Manel Kopp, you get a guy like Brandon Royval, you get those type of guys who are going to mix it up. You get a lot more problems to deal with, a lot more weapons, a lot more tools that you got to figure out those problems and hopefully have a solution for those situations. I don't think it was his most exciting fight by any means, but at the end of the day, like I said, you're fighting a former title challenger. You got to do what you got to do to get the win. And I think he did enough. Could have done more. You could always do more. Anytime you go back and you critique any of your performances, there's always going to be those things like, I could have did this, I should have did that. But I thought it was enough against a guy who gave you X amount of problems and you were able to solve those problems. All in all, great job for Brandon Moreno. And like I said, as an old school guy, a guy who watches pretty much all the fights, to see one of the, I don't want to say, I guess a veteran at this point, a real veteran at this point. I mean, I'm 35, but he's just as much of a veteran as I am. To see a guy like that go back and get his hand raised. Remember, Erceg's only got 6 fights in the UFC. Maybe 7 now, but I think 6. They say he went 0-3, so 6. That's a big difference from a guy like Brandon Moreno, who's on his second stint in the UFC, became world champion after getting cut, coming back, rattling off all those wins, getting a huge upset. There's nothing but praise, and for me, there's nothing but love on my side for a guy like Brandon Moreno. Now, of course, you got Torres knocking out Drew Dober. Oof. That was crazy because after the knockout, Drew Dober is 27-15 now. He is on a 3-fight losing streak, losing to Renato Moicano by decision, Gene Silva by doctor stoppage, and then Manel Torres by KO in round 1. And before that, he beat Ricky Glenn by strikes round 1, and then he lost to Favola by strikes in round 1. And before that, he was on a 3-fight win streak. It's just crazy how your career could do this. It could go back, and then you start to come back a little bit, and then you get knocked back down again. Now, Drew Dober is one of the perennial contenders of the game, or well-known names. I don't want to say contender in terms of like fighting for the world title, but he was on a streak where he was potentially 1, maybe 2 fights away from title shot conversation, right? But then he goes on a losing skid, and here we are, losing to an up-and-comer in Manel Torres, and it was just a clean 1-2 down the middle, sat him down. He ends up on the leg. He lands a big barrage of punches, and the ref ends up stopping the fight. Now, I don't want to say time has passed Drew Dober by, but it looks like the younger talent is starting to do this, and he's starting to do this. Now, this is a situation where you're in a crossroads where you have to ask yourself, where am I really at in my career? Can I continue to push towards greatness, or am I just fighting to collect a paycheck at this point? Now, Manel Torres, to me, is the future of this division. Drew Dober is lightweight of old, but still very dangerous. I don't know what caused him to get clipped by that 1-2, but Torres was so patient. Picture perfect 1-2 down the middle from an opposite stance. Bing, bink. 2 drops him, sends him crumbling down to the ground. He reacts, recovers, gets on the leg, puts on the finishing touches, and that's the fight. Even after the ref stopped it, he gets up. He thinks the fight's still going on. This is, I don't know if it was crazy power, but that was a lot of unanswered shots to take in that position. Even though you're holding on the leg, you're clearly getting your head rattled and not even like trying to advance position. You're stuck in a situation where if the ref doesn't jump in, you're probably eating 10 to 20 more shots, and it's probably not getting better in that sequence. You know what I mean? So great job for Torres. I think he's potentially a contender now at this position. I think he should get a ranked opponent. I don't know who would be next for him, though. There's a lot of matchups at 155, a lot of prospects. A fun matchup would be him versus my guy, the Black Wolf, Nassim Sadikov. That would be a great fight. But, of course, 2 prospects. Do you kill off a prospect making this matchup? And I don't know. But that's a barn burner of a fight. But this is what happens when you have a talent deep pool like this. Eventually, some of the prospects are going to have to bump heads. And I'm curious to see who they're going to match him up with next. Of course, Nassim is sitting there waiting in the wings, waiting for his matchup. But, of course, we're talking about the win of Torres. So, great job for him. I don't think Drew Dober is done just yet. I think one more after having 3 losses in a row. I just think maybe the top 15 might be too much for him at this point. And, of course, he just lost our prospect. So you have to kind of give him someone a little bit lower down to see if he can kind of recoup himself. Maybe it was just a situation where he got caught off guard, or maybe Father Time has actually passed him by. And I don't put this on anybody because I have no idea. I don't know what they're feeling. I don't know. I can only judge by what I'm seeing in the cage. He didn't look the fastest. The reads weren't, it's 1 round. There wasn't a whole lot to judge. To me, it was just a picture perfect 1-2 down the middle. Call him lacking, and that's the fight. And sometimes it goes like that. I've been on the winning side of that. I've been on the losing side of that. And on the winning side of that, of course, it's not a knockout situation, but it's also a situation where I take him down, catch him slipping, and I choke him out in the first round. I've done that multiple times against guys, and it's just one of those situations where you don't really want to write off the other guy because sometimes they have a career resurgence. See Corey Sandhagen, who is a vintage or a great example of that, So I don't want to write off Drew Dober, but I think the next one's going to be a very telltale if he's done or can he continue to compete with the best of the best in the UFC division. Lightweight is stacked with talent. And some of these guys are unknown. And to even put that in more perspective, the guy Guram Kutateladze just fought, Kutateladze came in as a big favorite. I don't want to say big, but he came in as a favorite. Sizable, enough of a favorite. He gets in there with this unknown guy I've never even heard of. I don't remember even seeing when he fought. And he puts on a masterclass performance. Calf kicks, body kicks, long jabs, moving his feet, 1-2 down the middle, getting out of there, head kicks. Who the hell is this guy? But that's why you play the game, you fight, and you don't know. You can't put yourself past anybody because this is the highest level of just stakes. Your health, everything, your career, your paycheck, the trajectory of your career, everything is on the line. And just going back to that point, it doesn't matter even if Dober fights an unknown guy. Maybe that guy's just as dangerous. And that's the game, and that's the risk we play. I would like to see Torres against a ranked opponent, and they could probably build him up, but I'm okay with him fighting a ranked opponent now. I think for him to do that to Dober, super impressive. There's nobody that's done that to Dober like that. I mean, you got Matt Frivola, but those guys were in a firefight in a pocket, right? But this was like, I'm circling, we're in a stagnant stance. It's not, I don't want to say stagnant, but we're stationary in front of each other, and bang, bang, clean. Put him out. Highly and very impressive. Now, with that said, I think Torres is one of the biggest winners of that event. Of course, Brandon Moreno too. Edgar Chavez getting a win over Vergara. First round, getting the rear naked choke submission. Big for him. And of course, Raul Rosas, I got to give props where due because I trained a lot with Vince Morales, and we made sure as best as we could, giving him the looks that he needed in sparring, training outside of that, and just going over some technical things after the sparring. And I thought he did a pretty damn good job of keeping me from getting the hooks in and flattening him out. Now, I won't talk too much in depth about the sparring, but I will say he did pretty damn good. So I was very impressed by how well he was able to stop the rear naked choke attempts and not fully getting locked into a body triangle, except I think it was round 1 or round 2 where he gave him like 3 minutes of control. I was actually surprised he couldn't get out, and maybe it was the altitude, but either way, Raul Rosas did a very good job of just maintaining the control, and I thought Vince was going to get the choke, the modified Darce choke, 2 different times in that 3rd round, but Rosas did a good job surviving, showing his heart, and you got to applaud that, right? Especially a kid at 20 years old, 5 wins in the UFC. I think I got into the UFC at 24. You know, I was hoping to get in at 21 so I could try to best John Jones's record of becoming the youngest champ, but didn't get enough fights, enough time too soon, right? So sometimes life plays its parts. But for him, coming in at 17, his trajectory of where he's at in his career, nothing but praise for him and his skill set. It would have been impressive, not impressive, it would have been interesting to see if he were to lose that back control position and Vince Morales were able to get up and put on some damage in round 2 and even in round 1, how the judges would have scored that fight. Just because if you get control and you land no damage, even if it's a dominant control, you have the back and you do no damage whatsoever. I'm just saying no damage. You maybe land 1 or 2 strikes. Oh shit, phone call, but the judging criteria has been very different of late, so I'm curious to know how they would have, like, just out of curiosity, how they would have judged that. 3 minutes of control versus the guy comes out, reverses the position, and then lands 5 to 10 big shots on the ground. Even if you're covering up, but lands 5 to 10 big shots. Looks great for the judges, looks great for the crowd. What do you do in that situation? And I'm asking as someone who wants to learn how these judges are seeing these fights so that we, as the athletes, understand what we need to do whenever we're put in these type of situations. You feel me? So with that said, again, great job for both guys. I thought Vince fought a great fight. Obviously losing, I think 3 now from his return to the UFC. Yeah, he got that Peruvian necktie and against Hunter Azor, who was a UFC vet, also on the comeback season of Tough. He lost to Lapilus by decision, Elijah Smith by decision, now Raul Rosas by decision. So that is a tough situation to be in, man, but he's a great fighter. I just think there's something not clicking because in the room, dude, I'm training with this guy. I'm like, dude, I think you're pretty damn good. Very, very good. Maybe it's one of those situations where a sports psychologist could be helpful. Guys see some people use that and they have some success. They start to turn around their career. Or maybe it's just, I don't know. Only he can answer that. I know he put out a video. I sent him a text and it's like, dude, I thought you fought your ass off. You fought pretty damn well. And, I was jumping up hoping that he would get the submission. And not a knock on Raul. It's just, I trained with the guy, helping him prepare. It would have been nice to see him go out there and get the W. He's training with me. He's training with Marab, getting those looks, training with Ricky Simone. It would have been great of a upset to get something like that under his belt, right? Over this young prospect who everyone's thinking may eventually fight for UFC gold and may eventually become a UFC champion, Raul Rosas. These are very likely things to happen. But with that said, great performance by both guys. Raul Rosas was able to tough it out in that third round, showed the dog in his heart, and was able to get the win. Stuck to the game plan, and it seems like he's maturing. He's starting to do the right thing. So congrats to him and his team, and look forward to seeing what they have for him next. But with that said, guys, I'm here, Fontainebleau. I'm about to go pull up and tone up. So I'll see you guys later. Thanks for checking us out. Short podcast today. See you guys next time. I'll be cornering next week at UFC Apex. And we got O.D. Osborne, me, him, Alex Perez, Dewey Cooper. We've been putting a lot of work in with him. They've been putting in more than I, but I've been trying to, help out where I could and fill in the gaps with some situations. I'm looking forward to that fight. With that said, stay blessed. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.